I'm Michael Martinez, and you're about to listen to an AI generated discussion of my article, How Much of the Fourth Age of Middle-earth Did Tolkien Write About? The AI hosts did pretty well pronouncing the names, although they do tend to conflate some things. So you'll hear about Thane, Peregrine, Pippin somewhere in the middle of the discussion, and there are a couple of other minor anomalies. I rewrote this article after listening to my first attempt to generate the discussion because the AI host mixed up some key names and didn't cover as much information as I had hoped. By expanding the original blog post, I was able to prompt the AI to include more details about Tolkien's Fourth Age. If you've only read the original article, I think you'll find this discussion and the revised article much more interesting.
Welcome to the deep dive. So, you sent us down a really fascinating path this time.
Oh, yeah. What's the topic?
Exploring the Fourth Age of Middle-earth. You know, the time after Sauron's fall. We're digging into material from the Middle-earth and J.R.R. Tolkien blog.
Okay. Yeah, the Fourth Age.
Yeah.
It's that period people often think of as just, well, the happy ending.
Exactly. But is it the whole story? That's what we're looking into.
Right, because when you finish Lord of the Rings, you definitely get that feeling of closure. Sauron's gone, the king's returned.
Yeah, wrap it all up nicely.
But the sources you mentioned, especially looking at Tolkien's other writings, they kind of suggest the victory wasn't like the absolute end of all challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal today is really to dig into what Tolkien himself actually hinted at, about this new age.
You're spot on. You, our listener, wanted to know what might have come next. What really happened after the credits rolled, so to speak.
Yeah.
So our mission here is to pull out the most compelling bits from what are often pretty sparse details.
Sparse is the word.
Yeah. We want to understand the potential for good stuff, sure, but also maybe lingering conflicts? Or even new ones.
It's like looking at the first few chapters of a history book that, well, never got fully written.
That's a great way to put it.
And it's really crucial to get that up front. Tolkien wrote surprisingly little, like in detail, about the Fourth Age beyond those first few decades.
Right, we're not talking about another Silmarillion or anything.
No, definitely not.
It's more like glimpses. So Tolkien apparently pictured the Fourth Age lasting, what was it, around 2,500 years, according to the peoples of Middle-earth?
Yeah, a huge stretch of time. But like you said, almost everything we actually know happens way earlier.
Pretty much all before FA 250. That's year 250 of the Fourth Age. For anyone keeping track, we'll use FA for that.
Right. And even within that, the most detail is really packed into the first 60 years or so, up until Sam Gamgee leaves Middle-earth.
FA 60, yeah. After that, the records get fuzzy.
Very fuzzy.
But we do have a clear starting point, right? Shire year 1422.
Which is the year right after Elrond and Galadriel and a lot of the other elves sailed west.
Really marks the shift, the age of men truly beginning.
Exactly. So looking at those early events gives us a good feel for the initial character of the age.
Okay, let's do that. What jumps out?
Well, pretty early on, FA 10, so just 10 years in, Merry becomes Master of Buckland.
Meriadoc Brandybuck, yeah.
And he gets gifts from King Aemir in Rohan, and also from Faramir and Eowyn down in Ithilien.
Ah, nice. Shows those connections stayed strong after the war.
Definitely. And then just 2 years later, FA 12, Pippin becomes the Thane.
Peregrine Cook.
Right. And Aragorn actually makes the Thane, the Master, and the Mayor of the Shire official counselors of the North Kingdom.
Oh, interesting. So really bringing the Shire into the fold politically.
Yeah, integrating them properly. Then FA 14, Aragorn himself comes north.
Yeah.
Visits Arnor.
His ancestral kingdom.
Exactly. Spends time near Lake Avendom, maybe Innuminus, the old capital. And he actually meets hobbits at the Brandywine Bridge.
Wow. That must have been something for them. The king greeting them personally.
Big symbolic moment. And that's also when Eleanor Gamgee, Sam's daughter, becomes one of Queen Arwen's handmaidens.
More connections. It sounds pretty idyllic, honestly.
It does seem that way. Sam and Rose and Eleanor even take a year-long trip to Gondor in FA 20.
A whole year. That suggests things were pretty stable. Travel was easier.
Seems like it. And Aragorn keeps showing favor to the Shire. FA 30, he grants them the West March.
Expanding their land westward.
Yeah. And then a few years later, FA 33, Thane Peregrine Pippin, he appoints Eleanor's husband, Fastred, as the warden of this new West March.
So the hobbits are managing their own bigger territory, taking on responsibility.
Exactly. But, it wasn't all just expansion and visits. There's sadness, too.
Like Rose Gamgee passing away.
Right, in FA 60, which leads to Sam eventually sailing west himself. He was the last of the ring bearers.
And didn't Merry and Pippin go back to Rohan around then?
FA 62, yeah. Emer was getting old and sent for them. He died that autumn. Merry and Pippin stayed in Gondor after that, actually, until they died.
Wow. So those bonds lasted their whole lives.
They really did. And Aragorn, King Elisar, he reigned for a long time, until FA 119.
A good long run. Then he passed the crown to his son, Eldarion.
And Arwen. She went to Lorien and passed away the next year. The end of an era, really.
So yeah, that early period, it paints a picture of peace, rebuilding, friends staying close.
It does. But, like the blog we looked at points out, there are these undertones, hints in Tolkien's other notes that suggest it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Okay, right. This is where it gets maybe less sunshine and roses.
A little bit, yeah.
You mentioned Aragorn and Eomer fighting battles.
Yeah, Tolkien mentions it somewhere. Many battles in foreign lands. That's quite a statement, isn't it?
It really is. It suggests ongoing war, or at least military campaigns, beyond their borders. But the main timelines don't list them.
Nope. Very vague. Who were they fighting? Where? We don't really know for sure.
And there was something about Dunland, too.
Right. The Peoples of Middle-earth says Eomer's rule extended into Dunland.
The Dunlandings. They hadn't always been friendly with Rohan.
Exactly. So how did that happen? Was it peaceful? Did they join Rohan willingly? Or was there some kind of conquest involved? Tolkien just leaves it hanging.
Interesting ambiguity there. And what about Faramir? You mentioned his role wasn't easy.
Not at all. Tolkien, in one of his letters, letter 244, calls him the resident March Warden of Gondor.
March Warden? Sounds demanding.
It was. He was basically in charge of reclaiming lost lands in Ithilien, dealing with outlaws, and specifically mentions orc remnants.
Orc remnants. So orcs were still a problem even after Sauron's fall.
Apparently so, at least in the east, near Mordor. And Faramir also had to deal with the lingering shadow of Minas Morgul. It implies constant vigilance, ongoing security issues.
This wasn't just ceremonial stuff then.
No, real work, real danger. And Tolkien also mentions Aragorn leading expeditions against enemies in the east. With
Faramir and Imrahil of Dol Amroth as his commanders.
Right. So Gondor was actively fighting, pushing back against threats, certainly in those earlier years of Aragorn's reign.
Okay, so maybe not quite the instant peace we sometimes imagine.
Seems that way.
Yeah.
Which brings us to something really fascinating. The New Shadow.
Ah, the unfinished sequel?
Exactly. Tolkien started writing it, set maybe 100 years after Aragorn's death, so during Eldarion's time.
But he abandoned it pretty quickly, didn't he?
He did. And his reason why, in letter 338, is, well, it's quite something.
What did he say?
He felt that the king's peace, the general stability, wouldn't make for a good story. He thought major wars were basically over.
Okay, so far so good.
But then he says, this is the kicker. He believed people, men specifically, would eventually get restless, experience a kind of boredom with the good.
Boredom with good, wow.
Yeah, and this boredom, he thought, would lead to trouble. Secret societies, dark cults. He even mentions orc cults popping up among adolescents.
Orc cults, like kids worshipping orcs or Sauron?
Something like that. It's a really dark turn, isn't it? Suggests that even without a Dark Lord, evil finds a way, maybe from within human nature itself.
That definitely paints a much more complex picture of the Fourth Age. Not just happily ever after.
Not at all. And the blog post digs into other potential problems, things Tolkien sort of left hanging.
Like what?
Well, remember those embassies Aragorn received when he became king? From various peoples.
Yeah, implies diplomacy, alliances.
Initially, yes. But who's to say those relationships stayed friendly forever? Politics change, you know.
Good point. And what about Mordor itself? What happened there?
Huge question mark. Did Aragorn just leave it empty, try to resettle it? What about any orcs left hiding, or the humans who used to live there as slaves? The texts just were pretty silent.
Could have been a source of trouble for a long time.
Very possibly. And then there were the corsairs of Umbar, down south.
Aragorn kicked them out of Pelargir during the war.
He did, but that was Pelargir. Umbar itself, their main base, was never conquered by him. They had a long history of raiding Gondor. Did they just give up?
Seems unlikely. Another potential enemy right there.
And just generally, the land south of Mordor, Harad, and places like that, Tolkien mentions an ancient enmity with Gondor.
Deep-seated grudges. They probably wouldn't just vanish because Sauron was gone.
Exactly. And the Easterlings, too. They were Sauron's allies repeatedly. Maybe they regrouped eventually, tried pushing west again. The map didn't suddenly become all friendly.
Right. What about closer to home, like Mirkwood?
Well, the elves of Lorien dealt with Gul Guldur, broke its power. But southern Mirkwood was still pretty wild, had other evil peoples. Did clearing out Dol Guldur fix everything? Probably not entirely.
Lingering shadows.
And Moria. That's a big one.
The dwarves eventually went back, right? During the 7th, maybe?
Yeah, tradition says they reclaimed it. But the blog asks a good question. Were all the orcs gone? Or did some remain, causing trouble for, Rohan or Lorien nearby?
It's interesting. In the new Shadow fragment, orcs supposedly hadn't been seen in Gondor for ages.
Right, which suggests maybe they were mostly wiped out or driven far away.
But then there's that discovery Birgil makes at the end of the fragment, something ominous.
Exactly. It hints that maybe evil wasn't gone, just hiding, waiting.
Chilling. And even up north, near the Shire, in Eriador.
Yeah, that area was never totally safe. Remember Barlaam, Butterbur, and Bree worrying about trouble on the roads during the War of the Ring?
And Aragorn himself said at the Council of Elrond that enemies still lurked nearby, even then. Orcs in the mountains.
So even after the war, it's likely there were still pockets of danger, orcs or other nasty things hanging around in the wilder parts of Eriador.
So putting it all together, it sounds like Lord of the Rings ends with hope, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. A massive victory, the promise of renewal.
But Tolkien, in these scattered notes and letters, he also quietly planted seeds for future problems.
Yeah, these little glimpses, hints of external conflicts, unresolved stuff from the past, even this idea of internal rot setting in later on.
It really drives home that history doesn't just stop, Even after a huge world-changing event, there are always consequences, loose ends, new challenges.
And maybe, like the blog suggested, Tolkien deliberately kept it vague. Didn't want to map out the Fourth Age too much, maybe didn't want it to feel too much like our own history, perhaps.
Could be. Keep some mystery.
Exactly. He gave us enough to spark the imagination about what might have happened, but left the full story untold.
All right, so let's wrap up this deep dive. The main takeaway seems to be, yes, the Third Age ended with Sauron's defeat and a sense of resolution.
But Tolkien's limited writings on the Fourth Age show he was already thinking about future challenges, changes, transformations. Seeds were planted.
We get hints of wars, old enemies lingering, maybe even new darkness emerging from within society itself.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about all these hints, the unrest, the remaining enemies, that idea of the boredom of good.
What kind of stories do you think might have played out across those long centuries of the Fourth Age?
Yeah, what does it suggest about how conflict and change work, even after you think you've won the ultimate victory?
Maybe it'll make you want to go back and reread those appendices or look into some of those letters and later writings yourself.
Definitely worth pondering. It's an intriguing, somewhat mysterious chapter of Middle-earth's history.